Welcome to Let's Talk Ball. I'm Thad Brown along with Carl Jones. Every single week, we pour over the all 22 film of every single Bills game, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and what the Bills might be able to do better going forward, especially with, I don't know, the biggest game of the year on tap for Sunday. Right now, though, we're going to start with discussing the Broncos win. A lot of good from this one, Carl. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. And I kind of told you this story before we got going. There's been a number of times over the last few years you watch a game from the press box and you think, wow, this player was amazing. And then I go in the locker room, I talk to the player and I say, how awesome was it that you were amazing today? And they're like, I don't know, whatever. And I'm wondering, why are you taking the bait on this question? You were great. And then I go back and watch the film and I'm like, all right, maybe they weren't that great. For me in this game, it was the offensive line, who was still very, very good, but the Broncos D-line is good for a reason. And there were moments where they certainly got their wins in this game.
Think of Zach Allen with the sack that he had when he kind of tossed David Edwards to the side, showing, hey, my man, I'm an all-pro for a reason. When you watched it live, there were a bunch of plays where the offensive line is creating displacement, moving the Broncos off their spot. I did see watching it back there, Nick Bonito, obviously Zach Allen, Jonathan Cooper made some plays that showed like why they were one of the best units in football. But James Cook made them right a lot of the time when maybe they were wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's where I want to go next. But just to complete the point on the offensive line, Bonito, for a smaller guy, showed an amazing amount of power. There were multiple plays where he just took Deion Dawkins and literally drove him in. He almost sacked Josh Allen a couple times using Deion Dawkins as the method of tackling. I was incredibly impressed by that. And the other part of this, why that Bills run game works so well that you were just talking about, is because I thought James Cook had his best game of the year, maybe his best game ever. He ran with so much toughness in this game, and not just that one play where Deion Dawkins kind of dragged him for 10 yards. It was every single play, getting 3 yards when only one was available, taking a pile, moving it forward, and the patience was good too. There were a couple plays that were blocked okay, but they weren't blocked how it was drawn up on the whiteboard. And he had to be, like I said, patient, wait for space, use linemen the right way, use leverage the right way. I thought he was just amazing in this game.
You hear a lot of times with younger backs in the NFL, and you hear a coach come out and say, they finally understand why we do what we do. And you heard that this offseason, beginning part of this season, where like why James Cook took the leap. There are certain plays where you can see that the things are clicking for him in terms of, if this happens, this is where I go. The one play that we all at home will remember is where he bounces out every single, like if he feels as if the corner is too tight and he's too close to the formation, or he's too far away, for example, and he can't scrape and make the tackle off the edge, I'm going to bounce it out and let's turn it into a track meet. Stuff like that is when an offensive line coach, Aaron Cromer and Joe Brady, drill it into you and say, hey, if you see this, this is why you can take advantage of it. That's just one example of it. But he just feels like a more decisive player in year 3.
The decisiveness is a big part of it. The thing you're talking about, using corners, he's gotten really good at that. Did that in the first quarter. I think it was the second, third play, offensive play of the game for the Bills. Just saw a corner that was way too far away and made for the edge and was able to get 16 yards out of it. To be honest, the only knock I'd have on him in this game, he got a little too happy with that. I think there were a couple plays where he probably should have turned it upside and got what he could, instead bounced it out and tried to, make a big play that wasn't there. But regardless, when James Cook is running like this behind an offensive line that's been really good all year, it makes this Bills run game so dangerous, because you don't have to just rely on Joe Brady winning the X's and O's. You don't have to rely only on Deion Dawkins or Spencer Brown hitting a block. You've got multiple ways to win in there. And, even we'll get to Joe Brady in a minute. There were some wrinkles that I liked in this game. They're expanding the run game. So the Bills run game is in, really, really good shape. With the pass game, I thought Josh Allen, look, we all know the spectacular throw to Ty Johnson, incredible play. I mean, it's crazy that he does stuff like that. And me and you are going to gloss over it because it's just another day in the office for Josh Allen. I thought his decision-making in this game was really, really good, though. When to tuck it, when to throw it away, which player to throw to. He had a really, really nice game. And, Carl, one of the things that you noticed was the way the Bills took advantage of the Broncos kind of backing off a little bit against some Bills receivers.
Yeah, those quick hitters to Khalil Shakir, those only happen when the nickel cornerback, the person across from him, is 5, 6, 7, 8 yards off the ball. So clearly that was something that they saw on film and said, you know what, this nickel either A, isn't physical enough to blow this up, or he's just too far back to make a play. And they said, we're going to pepper this bad boy. I think they hit it 3-4 times, or a different variety of that same type of play. And Khalil Shakir had made a day out of that. You see it at times this season with the Bills taking care of that, and then other times they don't come to it. But boy, I'm sure all week in film, they were like, we get this look. Let's not check anything. Let's just run it. And you clearly saw why, because there was plays where you're like, man, Khalil Shakir's contact balance is crazy. And it was based on all those plays right there.
Well, one of them was a play where Denver had it stopped, and he still made 7 yards out of it, bouncing off 3 guys. And Shakir, like you saw it on the punt return. I've always thought Shakir can be a really good punt returner in the NFL. He had a good one of those. This is what he does best. But going back to that play, I think another part of why it triggered, I didn't chart it, but it felt like most of those plays were run when the Broncos were rushing 5 or showed the 5-man line. So you're taking another guy out of the secondary area, the back 2 levels of the defense, who would normally be available to make that tackle. Probably makes it a little more of a numbers advantage for the Bills. But yeah, they peppered that really, really well. Another thing I like that Joe Brady brought out in this game, a pulling guard. David Edwards and Osiris Torrance got to run for a little while. They had to be excited. I can't wait to talk to them about it. You guys remember how to do that, right? And it worked out well a couple of times. The Broncos did figure it out later, but there were 2. They hit a couple of first round runs using out of 21 personnel, Reggie Gilliam and a guard leading a running back off tackle. I thought it was a great wrinkle. You talk about linebackers scraping. The Broncos were doing that in those spots. So again, another situation where I thought like the preparation allowed the Bills to get some easy wins over the weekend. Another way that the Bills have been getting wins all year long, and we hear it all the time on X and O All 22 Twitter, is the ability for teams, and the Bills in particular, to use motion. It was a big part of the Curtis Samuel touchdown, but that was far from the only time the Bills employed and made use of it in this game.
Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why you use motion, but 2 for me that at least stick out is A, to get information, whether that's a man versus zone tell, or to create leverage. That can be the running game to help a blocker get leverage on a linebacker or a cornerback, or sometimes, like you see on the Patrick Surtain touchdown or Curtis Samuel touchdown against Patrick Surtain, to create leverage on a route. Not that play, but I want to go back to the first quarter where they used both of those examples on one play. Curtis Samuel was lined up in the backfield, and then they motioned him out, or shifted him out, to the Christian McCaffrey alignment, which is basically 5 yards off the ball, but like directly to the left of where a running back lines up. When Josh Allen sees the linebacker goes out, all right, it's man, boom. So I'm my mind is in the man world now. And then he brings in Dalton and Kay to kind of create a stack. And in doing so, he creates leverage on the inside player, and boom, quick out route. The linebacker never had a chance. That is one play, and both uses of motion or shifting helped out the offense. And then obviously on the Curtis Samuel touchdown, I mean, that I got annoyed watching it as a defensive back, because I'm like, there's nothing you can really do there. It happened so fast. But once again, when you have a team like the Broncos who have good cornerbacks, I don't know about safeties, but good cornerbacks, hey, we can't beat these guys one-on-one or just like lining them up on the line of scrimmage and go to work. Let's use these guys in different ways using their athletic gifts. Because we talked about this early on in the year. Remember when I said Keon Coleman, that touchdown against the Jaguars, where you just say run from point A to point B and you can get beat man coverage? Well, Curtis Samuel is much faster than Keon Coleman. And what was that play right there? You run from here and you run to the pylon and don't stop until you're 30 yards down the field. That's exactly what happened there. And that's obviously Joe Brady getting most of the flowers there, but the execution as well helped that play for sure.
When it comes to the motion discussion, the 2 things that bother me. Number one, it feels like the idea of using motion, although gaining information is one part of it, but also to try and confuse or entice the defense into confusion by moving guys around, to which I say, look, these are professionals. They're going to get it right most of the time. This is not a way to unlock confusion. Now, they got it on this one play. And that leads me to the second part of this, where the Bills use motion so many times. Of course, it was going to work sooner or later, because the offense is that good. Things are just going to work. They're that talented. How much is motion really, making a difference? I mean, look, I know what you're saying about gaining information from it, but I really think the discourse around motion and how much it is the magic pill, the red pill from, the Matrix, I think it's certainly overblown a little bit.
Some of that has to do with the quarterback. Some quarterbacks prefer it. Like some quarterbacks want as much information with their own personnel as possible. Obviously, Tom Brady was the king of that. You see Josh Allen loving that world as well. Any Kyle Shanahan tree deviant, they all live in that world as well. But then you got Joe Burrow, who hates it. Joe Burrow wants to just sit there and say, I don't want nobody to move at the snap. I just want to be able to process this pre and post snap. And he prefers that. Clearly, Josh Allen likes that. So I think on a comfort level, that is something that he prefers. And then also, when you talk about this Bills receiving core, we talk about the lack of separation. how many of these dudes do you truly trust? You line up here, you line up there, and go win without a little extra help. So I don't think it's some magic wand and say, boom, motion, good. Because if that was the case, the Miami Dolphins would win a Super Bowl every year with how much motion they use with track stars, right? So it's not as easy as that. But when a quarterback is most comfortable living in that world and you have a receiving core that needs an extra push to create leverage and create yardage down the field, I think it's beneficial in that regard. Because if I just saw Joe Brady line up in 2x2 every single play and just ask Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins to run digs and fades all day, well, we would be saying, man, Joe Brady's not really creative. So I think he's making the most of what he's given with this Bills offense.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the way you're laying it out is basically motion may not work for every play and every person, but for this team and this group, it's something that makes a lot of sense to use on a regular basis. All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Speaking of play callers, I thought Bobby Babich had a pretty solid game. Look, the Broncos came into this game as one of the top wide receiver screen teams in the NFL last half of the year. So they break it out in the first half. Little Marvin Mims out of the backfield, and Terrel Bernard is all over it. I mean, he was making the tackle before the snap even happened, basically. I thought, to me, he triggered so early. That had to be a Babich scout, be ready, good coaching, essentially, and give the guy credit. I mean, that's what his job is supposed to be. A couple good blitzes in this game. The one right after that play that got the Broncos off the field, a big spot following the fake punt, I thought was huge, using Cam Lewis to kind of attract the tackle and allow Von Miller to run in free. I mean, you gotta when you get an offensive tackle to look at 39 and 40 and be like, I gotta take 39. That's a good piece of coaching right there. I know it's easily done, but regardless, I was impressed by Babich. One of the other things he did in this game that we want to talk about when we get into like the Matt Milano discussion now, because there's a lot of talk about how well he played, was using Milano in a lot of different ways. One thing that I saw with Milano that I like a lot is using him up on the line of scrimmage as almost a fourth pass rusher. Although, Carl, he didn't really even rush all that much from that spot in this game.
No, he was kind of like a pseudo spy, which basically if the back stays in and he doesn't go out for a route, or sometimes the back did go out for a route and TB would take him, you just go get quarterback, see ball, get ball. Kind of like when you're playing in the backyard when you were a kid. Hey, you don't got much responsibility, Matt, but go be a ball player. And at this point where, he's still ramping up, he's been out for the past 3.5 months, and his instincts may not be all pro Matt Milano. I know he's athletic enough and good enough and healthy enough to go chase down Bo Nix. I really like how they implemented that. You saw that early on in the game where he chased him down I think he got credited for a sack on that play. So
the old sack for zero. I hate the play, but that's what he got. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard the PA announcer say that. I'm like, what? Okay, yeah. Whatever. Hey, it's good for the stat sheet. Regardless, it was cool to see him get used in that way because, as we all know, there are some athletic quarterbacks coming up if the Bills were to advance and beyond, and even this week, that Matt Milano, that role could be used for sure.
Well, and I like it too because if you think about who the four best pass rushers are on this team, I think Daquan Jones would probably be better than Matt Milano. But Matt Milano at his height, to me, has always been the best blitzing linebacker in the NFL. So why not make use of that ability? Put him on the line of scrimmage. If you don't want him to rush, that's fine. Now he can drop. I mean, it's a really unique chess piece that can present a whole lot of different looks. You can go three linemen rushing, 8 drop with Milano sitting right there, or you can rush him without having to have different personnel on the field. And I think you're right, using his smarts maybe over what he might not have totally physically right now, or at least his ability to be versatile makes a lot more sense to me at this point. With the defensive line, it didn't seem like there was a lot of pressure watching the game. Like it really felt like the Broncos, who had the best pass block win rate coming in, did their thing and gave Bo Nix a lot of time. And then you look at some stats. What was it? Next Gens had like 14 pressures in the game. Now, one of the things we got to point out with any discussion of the defense, the Broncos had 42 snaps in this game, which only 6 playoff teams have ever had less snaps. So, myself and AJ Feldman were laughing after the game. Matt Milano was second on the team with tackles with 3. He had 3 tackles, and that was second in the game. So when we cycle back now to the defensive line, they weren't spectacular, but Carl, I thought they were better and created more pressure than we've seen from them most of the season.
Especially considering who they were going up against in terms of pass rushing. The Broncos offensive line, for a bunch of reasons, the running backs included, they weren't the best team in terms of running at you. But in pass protection, they were objectively the best, or right there with the Detroit Lions in terms of pass pro all year long. And I mean, I know Bo Nix threw a touchdown on the play, but he got smoked on that by Austin Johnson, I believe.
Dewan Smoot, but yeah, that's
Dewan
fine.
Smoot, yeah. I knew it was one of the reserve defensive linemen, but so it may not have been consistent, and you're like, oh man, like he's building a campfire back there. And I know some of the next gen stats can look a little fluffy based on how many pressures they got at the end. But I thought, considering the job at hand and who was in front of him, they played okay. I don't think it was absurd or some superhuman level, or maybe how they played against the Detroit Lions a month prior. But I thought, you know what, check it off, good enough to get a win.
Yeah, and there were points in the game, late in the game, when it was 28-7 and it was pin the old ears back time and just rush however you want, where the Bills got some wins. And even though, yeah, it's an obvious passing situation and that does benefit the defense, you still got to get there. And you got to get there around some good offensive linemen. And the Bills did it. Look, Von Miller had his best 3-play sequence. It wasn't the same series, but his best 3 plays of consecutive defense that he's had all year, where he spun move Mike McGlinchey, then ran around him, and then went wide 9 and ran around him later in the game and got good pressures on all 3. Ed Oliver barreled through an offensive lineman at one point. Daquan Jones had a great pressure. Greg Rousseau did his thing. So when you're getting, I think the thing I like the best, when you're getting that, even if we're kind of like, I don't know, it's okay. When you're getting that against a great offensive line, I feel really good about going forward, because the opposition can't get any tougher than the one they saw against Denver. Let's talk about the secondary for a minute. I really enjoyed watching Courtland Sutton v. Christian Benford. And as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, wow, Mr. Cornerback himself, Carl Jones, has to be like wiping the drool off his screen, watching 47-14 go at it. What'd you think?
I loved it. It was a true back and forth battle. Courtland Sutton got some wins. Obviously, Bills fans are. Josh Reedy talked about it all week on Buffalo Kickoff Live. For 2 reasons, they should know who he is. One, the touchdown that he caught last year at Orchard Park. And then the other reason is he's almost been on the team the past 2 years because he's been traded for so many times in terms of hypothetical trades and mocks on Twitter. But nonetheless, he's a big boy. And we've talked about ad nauseum on this platform that Christian Benford is a pretty large cornerback as well. It was mano, the one catch on the sideline where he kind of threw him by. I mean, if I'm a DB me, hey, ref, help me out here, help me out. But like that's the difficulty of playing against a physical receiver. There were some reps where it was, hey, Courtland Sutton, you just run from point A to point B and just run away from Christian Benford. He caught a pass. That was the one that set up the missed field goal right before halftime. I mean, in terms of AFC receivers that we're going to see, I don't know if you're going to see anyone better than him. I don't think Zay Flowers, if he is healthy, he's going to be a 70-80% version of himself on Sunday. And then the Chiefs, although I think collectively now they're a good unit, they don't have one player I wouldn't say is on par with Courtland Sutton. So, I mean, he held his own, and it was really good to see. For a game to only have 42 snaps, at least that portion of it was fun to watch.
You certainly won't see another receiver with that physical ability that Courtland Sutton has to be able to just kind of body up a guy, win on the sideline. I think we might see that in the Super Bowl if the Bills get there and it's Philly. Obviously, that'll be the A.J. Brown game, but we're a little ways from that. Like you said, and I thought about this after watching the game too, that this was probably as tough a one-on-one test this Bills secondary is going to get before the Super Bowl, and even then it's probably got to be the Eagles. One thing I want to throw at you quick. I was not impressed with how easily it seemed like Broncos receivers were getting in between zones. Look, Bo Nix on multiple occasions played like a rookie. He short hopped. Like that drive at the end of the first half. He throws a ball where Matt Milano gets whooped by Javonte Williams too low. Williams would have got 20. There's another throw where it was either Mims or one of the lesser receivers who got in between a zone. And it's the old baseball adage where Bo Nix threw it 58 feet, not 60, and didn't get it there. And then there's the one on the run down the sideline, harder throw, but like if he puts that on a dime, that might be a touchdown. That was not the only part of the game too. It really felt like for a group of receivers, like the drop off from Sutton, everybody else is falling off a cliff, and it didn't seem to matter. The Broncos were finding space no matter what.
I think that's kind of the symptom of what we saw all year. The big plays on the running game kind of cloud how we feel about the defense when you look back at the numbers. When you look at most of the metrics in terms of the Bills' rushing defense, it's kind of like a top 12 unit. They just get gashed with explosive plays. It's the passing defense that's actually struggled, like
down in, down out.
Yeah, down in and down out. It just doesn't pop up as much because when they play average to bad quarterbacks, they take advantage of them. But when they play quarterbacks who can, make some stuff shake, they get gashed a little bit, whether that was the Lions game, whether that was the Rams game, Aaron Rodgers, the first meeting, the Ravens' first game didn't really count. CJ Stroud, what he did down in Houston. I think people, if you just look at this, take a step back and just say, hey, the run game has looked nasty at times. And I'm not saying it's great by any means, but the passing game has been the bigger issue this year, passing defense, excuse me. And boy, it was some Broncos receivers. I'm like, dude, just you ain't got like you got the old school gloves. Like these new school gloves, like they take stick for real, and they wasn't sticking. So if you're if you're Jamel Adai and Bobby Babbage, you're not the defensive coaches this week, you going back to the film and saying, hey guys, we can be much better on the back end.
Maybe more aggressive too, I think was the thing I'd like. I know that it's a zone defense and it's kind of asking them to do not what they normally do, but I would have liked a little more of that. Let's turn to the Ravens, for a little bit here. The Ravens gashed Pittsburgh with zone read stuff, at least early. And that's a part of the problem with that run game. When you have a quarterback and a running back, Lamar and Derrick Henry, who are both just Hall of Famers, which poison do you want to pick? I thought, though, watching it, that the Bills would be able to play the zone read better just because the way they scheme it up and the athletes they have with Milano and Terrel Bernard, they don't have to chase as much as the Steelers generally do. So I think they'll be a little better shape this weekend in that particular area, correct?
Yes, not to get too technical here, but only reason I know this because I played against Lamar Jackson twice, and they had the corners and safeties in the meetings. It was an all hands on deck meeting when you play against Lamar Jackson. So you learn the techniques of how to play the read option. And what the Steelers were basically implementing was saying, hey, defensive end, you crash down and tackle running back every single play, or you spill every single blocker. Linebacker, you fill over the top and go tackle Lamar Jackson. Well, that didn't work because there's no linebacker fast enough for Lamar Jackson to get to the edge. And B, the Ravens O-line is really like tough. So, I mean, you can crash down if you want. Might get washed down, and now you're losing in both fronts. The Bills don't play it that way. I'm not saying the way they play it is like scheme proof.
Yeah,
right. Or genius. But they don't play it that way. So they won't get blown up in that regard.
Speaking of blown up, one of the things that stands out about the Ravens up front, both sides of the ball, they are significantly bigger than the Broncos and really, most teams. They really on par with the size that the Lions will give you up front. Daniel Fa'alele is 380 as a guard, which is just ridiculously big. So, the Bills do play a little bit undersized on both sides of the ball. It's how they roll. They're athletic. They like to be able to move. That is a concern for me going into this game. Real quick, let's talk about the Bills on the second level of the defense. Taron Johnson, Terrel Bernard, Matt Milano coming back into the game. And we've all kind of joked about this. We want to ask the question to coaches, how big a deal it's going to be? We all know the answer is really freaking big. But can you describe how you think it makes a difference against this Ravens run game when you bring those three starters back instead of, Dorian Williams, Cam Lewis, et cetera?
Because of how particular the details are when you play against an offense like this. It's not like any other offense in the National Football League in terms of all the moving parts and paying attention to your keys. If you have someone who is not used to that or doesn't maybe have the experience going against it, you're going to have your mind spinning. And I know that maybe Terrel Bernard has gone against the Ravens 15 times in his career, but he's gotten a lot of reps this season. He's a veteran guy in terms of this defense. He knows it inside and out. He knows where he's supposed to be. And I think that when you get three players back who know where they're supposed to be, it's going to help out tenfold. And to kind of nip this narrative in the bud about, hey, take Taron Johnson off the field. The only time Taron Johnson is going to come off the field is when the Ravens go 13 or 14 personnel, which they will. But when they're in 12 personnel, 2 tight ends and 2 receivers, Taron Johnson will be out there because who had the best rushing defense this year in nickel personnel? The Buffalo Bills did. And that's part because of 7 is that good in playing in the run game. Now, the Ravens last week, they did it 16 times, and I guarantee they're going to do it Sunday as well. They would bring in a 6th offensive lineman and then bring in Patrick Ricard. Taron Johnson will need to be out there for that. So I think that's when you'll see Dorian Williams come into the game. But folks at home, if you think taking an all-pro caliber player off the field is going to help you out, that's not going to happen.
It feels like the X's and O's overall in this game favor Baltimore. All the things they've done, the improvements they made down the stretch, they're probably a little better in terms of their receiving group. They're probably maybe more than a little better when it comes to the back 7 and what they can do against the pass. Up front, I think the Bills' offensive line is as good as it gets, but defensive line-wise, the Ravens are a little better. To me, Carl, at the end of the day, I think this is about, can Lamar Jackson play at the high level he's played all year? Because he has never played that way in the playoffs. When you go into this game, I know Josh Allen, or I feel like I know Josh Allen, is going to play at an elite level. He may not win, but he's going to play at that level. I don't know if I'm going to get that out of Lamar. If the Ravens do get that, then you cycle down to everything else. And yeah, there are spots where the Bills can have guys play a little bit better than they have and improve and kind of correct that. But if you get full speed Lamar, I think it's hard for the Bills to find a path to win that doesn't involve turnovers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it will be their only pathway to victory in that regard will be a track meet. I'm talking like 31st or 31 type of game. The scary thing about the Ravens is the fact they do have 2 Hall of Fame players. But when one of them is not playing at that level, then that's when things start to shift, because if Zay Flowers is not out there, you take away a Pro Bowl type of receiver, and then the offensive line is good, but they're best going forward, not backwards. And when you force Lamar Jackson to be the guy, who I still think is a phenomenal passer, I'm not saying that by any means, but what makes them historic, elite, is when they play the game on their terms, not when there's 3rd and 8 every play, or they're forced into this game where Lamar Jackson has to throw the ball 45 times a game.
And that's a part of what the Bills' best plan might be, is the old best defense is good offense. You keep scoring, you keep forcing the Ravens to keep up with you, and I think the Bills, have a decent opportunity to win. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to lay this out like the Bills they're a 1-point underdog. That sounds about right to me. This is going to be, basically a coin flip.
Yeah.
All right. As always, you can check out Let's Talk Ball at rochesterfirst.com. Click on sports. We're on the 8 Sports Extra tab. It's on WIVB.com. It's also wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Next week, we will break down Bills and Ravens. Y'all might want to get a snack for that show. We could do 2 hours on that game. It's going to be epic. For Carl Jones, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Let's Talk Ball.